Well, welcome to Author Talk, and I can't begin to tell you how excited I am. This is kind of one of those fangirl moments where I'm going to get to talk to one of my absolute favorite authors on the planet. You're not going to believe who this is. This is Mercedes Lackey, and this woman has written over 100 books in her lifetime, and every one of them, in my personal opinion, because I've read most of them, are complete winners. Um, she's got some things to tell you about the writing life that hopefully will make a difference for you today. So we're going to welcome Mercedes Lackey. Are you ready? As I said, we have Mercedes Lackey today, and she's been around the block a few times as a well-published and well-known author. I know she goes to like the Gen Cons and like that, and everybody's a flutter. I definitely would be if I got an opportunity to be in her presence. And so virtually, we're going to be here today. And so Mercedes, welcome very, very happily to Author Talk.
Well, hi there. Glad to be here.
So Mercedes, my first question is, and I know that this is like on your website and in all of the fan stuff, but could you give us basically a quick rundown of what started you on the path to being a professional writer?
I always wrote. When I was a babysitter, I used to make up stories for the kids I'd babysit to. I wrote Andre Norton pastiches in spiral bound notebooks when I remember starting to do it about 11 years old. I wrote fan fiction after that, and after about 100,000 words of fan fiction or more, I decided I was going to try writing professionally.
Wow. Um, I know a number of people who are avid fan fiction writers, but aren't published yet. So I'm sure that that will be very encouraging to them. So one of the things I love about your books is um, your characters, and um, and my favorite of your characters are your bird characters. Now, you're one of the few people I know who can really bring a sentient bird to life in ways that I never expected. I'm actually in the process right now of rereading The Black Griffin. Um, and so my question is, which came first? I know that you do bird rescue and for raptors. Which came first, writing about the birds or caring for them?
Well, actually, when I was getting my degree in biology at Purdue, I minored in animal behavior, ethology. So I had that interest going for quite some time. It wasn't until just shortly before I quit my day job. Actually, no, it was after I quit my day job that I had the time to do the actual raptor rehab. That's when we started getting into it. Our first our first bird we rehabbed out of a spare bathroom because he was a little tiny kestrel. So that was about the right size cage for him to practice in. And one of the funniest things we did with him, he was an adult when we got him. He had a broken wing, and to make sure that he was able to hunt, we tried to get him to get live mice, but the only mice we could get were all white, and he didn't recognize them as being food. So we had to tea dye the mice.
Oh no, that's awesome. That is totally
The,
awesome.
the mice did not appreciate this, but they were not around long enough to really object.
True, true. Oh, that's awesome. So, I know that over the years you have collaborated with many amazing authors, including one of my other favorites, Anne McCaffrey. And I mean, we could sit here for hours and hours just talking about all the different people that you have collaborated with. But my question for you is, of the authors that we've interviewed so far, you're the first one who co-wrote books with other authors. And I was just wondering, um, first of all, what that collaboration experience was like, and how did you divide the labor when you're writing a novel?
It depends entirely on who I'm writing with. With Annie, we worked out a very extended outline together. It was about 40 pages long, and this was back in the day when there was not anything like the internet as we know it today. Uh, so we emailed the outline back and forth until we were both happy with it, and then I wrote from the outline and sent her chapters as I finished, and she put in whatever she wanted and sent it back to me. With Andre Norton, it was even earlier. That was the Elvenbane book. Uh, Plus, she was not at all comfortable with computers to speak of. So I went out to visit her, and we worked out the outline there. I printed it up when I had it all typed up, and she read it and made notes. And then as I did chapters, I left plenty of space for her to write more notes in the chapters. I'd mail them to her. She'd mail them back. I'd incorporate the notes. I'd email the finished product back to her, and we'd go back and forth until she was satisfied with the chapter. When I collaborated with Marion Zimmer Bradley and Andre Norton together on Tiger Burning Bright, we worked out the first couple of chapters where the three characters are together, and then we each split off, wrote our own chapters, and then we wrote an extensive outline that I wrote up into the conclusion.
Wow.
Nowadays, when I work with people, I work in Google Docs, and generally, if I can manage it, we're all in the same document at the same time.
Cool.
If not, like when I'm working with James Mallory, since he's a lark and I'm an owl, he does the first pass on the chapter, and Google Docs will notify you when somebody's changed something.
Right.
So when I see a change, then I go in and I do my thing. And when the chapter is about 20 pages long, we both conclude that it's done and we move on to the next chapter.
Awesome. That is so awesome. I'm in the process of actually writing my first novel, after writing for years on all kinds of other things. And just being in my own head sometimes is crazy enough without dealing with, I mean, you do this so beautifully, and all of the books that I've read by you and other authors together have always been so smooth and seamless. And so I've just always been kind of in awe of that. Um, One of the things that I noticed about how you write, or I should say, the effect of your writing, is that you do a lot of battle scenes in various of the books that I read by you. And um, they're not like modern day battle scenes. I'm a military veteran. I've been through basic training, know a little something about, battles and that sort of stuff, but it's all modern warfare. How do you construct those battle scenes so that they're so vivid, I can see them happening in my head?
Well, I was a member of the SCA, so I'm somewhat cognizant of how medieval, Renaissance, Tudor, right up to the point of gunpowder battles mostly took place in a one-on-one basis. And basically, when you're in a character's head in a battle scene, it's really one-on-one. Nobody does the I take on 20 people at the same time, because if they did that, they'd be dead.
Right.
So,
Okay.
so that's probably the secret to it. I, now, in the really big battle scenes where there's an overall picture of the battle that somebody is viewing from outside of it, I'm not really good at that. James Mallory is really good at that, so he usually does those. And a lot of times, well, in the books that I write with Cody Martin, uh, he's in HEMA, which is like SCA with real weapons,
Oh,
and so he usually does that in the books that I write with him.
okay. All right. Well,
And the books I write with Eric Flint and Dave Freer, Eric is a history major. I think he's got a master's in history, and he's actually forgotten more about history than I will ever know. So he usually handles the battle scenes in those books.
okay. Cool. So, all right. So, one of the things that you also do really amazingly well is moving your story along through conversations. It's always, I think, a thing in some people's heads that the way you move the storyline along is action, 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 and all of that is well and good. But I've noticed that you manage to actually move the plot along when your characters are having conversations with one another. And I was wondering if that is just part of your style or whether that's something that somebody taught you to do.
Well, it's part of my style, but it's also pacing. If you have nothing but action, then you exhaust the reader. You've got to give the reader a chance to breathe. And so when you have a conversation, it can't just be talking heads talking about nothing. It's got to be something that is going to be relevant to the story. And that's the way real life works too. As anybody who's been in the military knows, uh, being in any kind of warfare situation or something of that nature is 90% boredom and 10% terror.
Right.
So that's pretty much what happens in the books, with maybe 10% terror and 25% other kinds of action, and then the rest is conversation and things that are not necessarily actiony but are moving the story along.
Right. And I know that there are some authors that are known very much for their really intense descriptions of what the woodland looked like as they walked into it and stuff. And I've noticed that you seem to just fit that in as part of the experience of the character. And I think that that's really, really awesome.
Well, I have an analogy for that. Actually, I have two. The one is that if you're going to give the new ensign the tour of the Enterprise, you better be having something happening while they're doing it. Otherwise, it's just a travelogue.
Right.
And the other is that you should never lump all your description in one place so it stands out like a raisin in oatmeal.
Yeah, actually, I think that that's really, really good advice. And I know a few um, raisins and oatmeals, and even with some of my uh, favorite authors, there are some of them that get a little um, overly descriptive sometimes. And it's so refreshing to have something that it moves and breathes like if you were actually having an experience. You're not just moving through space. There's things going on in your mind. There are things going on around you. And it's not just a description of what color the walls of the room are. So I really, really appreciate that description. I think that's really cool. All right. So bearing in mind that this will be edited as necessary, I have a question and you can choose to answer or not. But inquiring minds, mine, wants to know, so which came first, the romance or the writing with Larry Dixon?
Simultaneously, we met at a science fiction convention and began plotting our first book together at that convention.
Oh, that's cool.
It was a pretty funny meeting too because he was in the van that was on the way to the television studio to do the little interview as part of the nightly news. And they had just picked me up at the airport, so my suitcases were still in the van when we went to this television studio. This was way pre-internet. There was no internet. There was very little cable in rural areas, so it was whatever your local tiny TV station was. Sort of like what was that TV show with the little radio station in Alaska? Uh, so this was a station in Meridian, Mississippi, and they brought us on to do a little TV interview with us during the nightly news, and they brought us on right after the report about the two old boys that saw a UFO in the swamp that night.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Oh, that's fun. And so it was love at first right then.
Yeah, kind of.
That's cool. I love it. So my oldest son, when I told him I was going to interview you, he said, I want to know who does her covers and does she get to choose those or does the publisher choose them? Because your publishers, he says, just jump right off the shelves at him.
Well, the publishers choose them. Unless you're somebody like Stephen King, you don't get a choice in your cover.
Oh.
And I've just been very lucky, mostly getting excellent artists. My DAW artist has always been Jody Lee, and she does all those beautiful covers in colored pencil. I couldn't believe it when I saw the
Wow.
originals. My Bane cover artist is often Larry. My editor there, Tony Weisskopf, figures that as long as I've got the artist right in house, I can do all the corrections right there. So
There you go.
that would be Larry. And then the rest of them have just been whoever was assigned to me.
Okay. Okay. And working with a publisher, um, so many of the authors coming along right now are doing self-publishing through Amazon or whatever, and don't have that experience that comes with working with a publisher to publish your book. What are your thoughts about self-publishing? Is there any kind of real future there, or do you still think that traditional publishing is going to continue to be the majority of the books that are published that are well known?
Well, the problem with self-publishing is that you are one tiny little speck in a sea of other self-published authors, and unless you have some other kind of book, for instance, you have a very popular blog or you have a very popular YouTube following, you're not immediately going to jump out of the sea of other self-published writers. And as Lawrence Watt Evans recently told somebody on Quora, your expectation for your first book is that it's not going to do very well. Just get used to it. It's not.
Right.
And traditional publishers are at least gatekeepers. They weed out, I'd say, 98% of the crap, and the stuff they do allow to get through is very often, again, somebody that had other means of self-promotion and got to their interest. And they've been burned very, very badly on some of these people, so they're more cautious now about picking people out of the self-publishing sea than they were before. For every Andy Weir, there's a couple of other authors that had big blogs that they thought were going to translate over well into a book, and the book failed disastrously.
There you go. Okay. So, how fun was that? I am really enjoying this wonderful opportunity to speak with Mercedes Lackey. And wait, there's more, but we're going to do it in a second episode. So tune in for part 2 of this magnificent interview with Mercedes Lackey. I know you won't be disappointed because in our next segment, she's going to talk about what you need to know as a writer. And she's going to lay it all on the line like you've never heard before. So I suggest for you the next episode, you take the notebook out and you take some notes because she's got some things to say that are important. Okay? So please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. All right? Because that's going to mean that you have the opportunity to know when we're doing other authors that you might really want to hear from.